My name is Simone Caldwell. I am 41 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, and on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of April, I was sitting at my desk at Meridian Infrastructure Group, third floor, Washington Street, the window behind me catching the kind of light that only exists at this elevation, eating leftover pad thai from a plastic container with a plastic fork, staring at a drainage assessment report I had been staring at for 45 minutes without absorbing a single line when my phone lit up with a nuzzins in a 4 area code. Charlotte, North Carolina. I counted 4 full rings before I made a decision. I have learned, over the course of 4 decades of being Harold Caldwell's oldest daughter, what Charlotte phone calls cost me. They cost sleep. They cost the careful, deliberate architecture of calm that I had built around myself over the years since I left that city. They cost the morning. I had learned, slowly, painfully, the way you learn lessons that nobody teaches you directly, to let 704 calls go to voicemail, to play them back from somewhere stable, somewhere I was already sitting down. But something made me answer this one. I don't know how to explain it except to say that the 11 days preceding that call had been the strangest, stillest, most airless 11 days of my adult life. 11 days since I had watched a live-streamed funeral on my laptop from my home office in Denver. The only I was permitted to attend the burial of my own father, while Owen sat behind me with his hand on my shoulder, and the knowledge settled into me like something permanent that I had not been wanted there. Not by Patricia, not by Brendan, not allegedly by Harold himself. Though I did not yet know, in those 11 days, whether that particular part was the truth or one more thing Patricia had decided to him. I answered, because grief makes you reckless in small ways. It erodes your defenses. You stop protecting yourself from the area codes. Caldwell. The voice was measured, unhurried in the specific way lawyers are unhurried when they are carrying information they know is about to rearrange someone's life and have made their peace with. Being the one to deliver it. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm the estate attorney handling your father's estate out of Charlotte. I've been attempting to reach you for 11 days. I set the fork down into the container. 11 days, I said. Yes, ma'am. I was given an incorrect contact number initially. I had to go through probate court records to locate this line. A brief pause. Miss Caldwell, your father left you something significant. He also left a letter. I'd like to arrange a time, video call, phone call, in person, whatever is most comfortable for you, to walk through everything. I remember looking at my monitor. The drainage assessment cursor blinking. The front range sitting on the horizon through my window under that October blue Colorado sky. Impervious and gorgeous and completely indifferent to what was happening to me in this building. When can we meet? I said. Before I tell you what Marcus Webb showed me that Thursday, I need to take you back. Because the phone call is only the end of one part of the story, and it means nothing, nothing, without everything that came before it. Before we get into this, please like this video and subscribe. But only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and your local time in the comments right now. I want to know where you are in this world. I want to know who is listening and what room you're sitting in, and what you're carrying with you today. Wherever you are, you found this story for a reason. Now let me take you back to Charlotte, North Carolina, 1990. I am 7 years old, and my parents are sitting me down at the kitchen table of our house on Braemar Court to explain that Daddy is going to live somewhere else now. My father's name was Harold James Caldwell. He was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, raised by a machinist father and a schoolteacher mother in a small house on Wendover Avenue. And he became the kind of man who fixed things with his hands on weekends and wore a tie to work every day of his professional life, and believed, with a quiet conviction he never fully articulated, that steady competence was its own form of language. He worked for 31 years at First National Bank of the Carolinas on Tryon Street, commercial loan officer rising to senior vice president, and he was proud of that career with the particular, specific pride of someone who had never expected anything to be given to him and was grateful that nothing was. He was not an effusive man. He was not the kind of father who said I love you easily, who pulled you into hugs without warning, who narrated his emotional interior. But when I was very small, before the divorce, before Patricia, before any of it, he used to let me climb into his lap while he watched the evening news. He would rest his hand on top of my head, flat and warm and deliberate, and I would drift half asleep to the sound of the television and the weight of that hand. And I think some quiet, stubborn part of me spent the next 3.5 decades looking for the feeling of that hand in some other form. Approval, maybe. Recognition. Something that said, I see you. You are mine and I am here. I think about that hand a lot. I think about the immense, tragic distance that can exist between what a person is capable of feeling and what they are capable of showing. I think about how a man can love his daughter with genuine depth and still allow an entire ecosystem to grow up around him that makes her feel she doesn't belong in his life. My parents divorced when I was 7. There was no screaming, no single catastrophic event that either of them has ever described to me. My mother, Diane Caldwell, née Moreau, has said, in the honest, unguarded way she talks about the past now, that enough years have created distance from the pain of it, that she and Harold were simply wrong for each other in the way that some people are fundamentally wrong for each other. She needed warmth and he needed quiet, and the combination eroded both of them in ways they couldn't articulate until the articulating was moot. They separated in March of 1990, and the divorce was final that August. My mother moved us to a rental house on Eastway Drive, on the east side of Charlotte. Harold moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in South Park, 15 minutes away by highway, and for the first 2 years the arrangement was about as functional as these arrangements can be when both people in them are decent and trying. I went to Harold's on weekends. We ate Bojangles chicken biscuits at the table by the window on Saturday mornings, the grease soaking through the paper bag in a specific way that I can still recall with perfect sensory accuracy. 30 years later, he taught me chess at the coffee table in his apartment, setting up the board with the careful attention of a man teaching something he believed genuinely mattered. He said to me once, during one of those Saturday mornings, "Learn to think 3 moves ahead, Simone. Learn to see the whole board, not just the piece you're about to move." I learned. I became very good at it. I want to acknowledge that before I say anything else about Harold Caldwell, he was not a monster. He was a man with a deep and specific failure of courage in one sustained situation, and the cost of that failure was paid overwhelmingly by me, and that is its own particular tragedy. The tragedy of the person who could have acted and chose the easier thing. I have had to learn to hold both truths at once, that he loved me, that he failed me, that both of those things are completely, irreversibly true. He met Patricia Howell in 1993. She was 42 years old, a property manager at a commercial real estate firm in the South Park area, and she was beautiful in a composed, deliberate way. The kind of woman whose clothes were always right, whose posture was always right, who controlled a room not by being loud in it, but by making it very clear she had already decided what the room was for. She and Harold got engaged within 8 months. They married in the spring of 1995 at Christ Episcopal Church on Providence Road in Myers Park. I was 9 years old, and I was a junior bridesmaid in a pale yellow dress Patricia had chosen, and I stood at the front of the church and smiled in photographs, and I thought, this is fine. This can be fine. My dad is happy, and that is the thing that matters most. I was 9. I had no idea, yet, what I was looking at. I know what I was looking at now. The year Harold and Patricia married, she was already pregnant with Brendan. My half-brother, Brendan James Caldwell, was born in February of 1996, when I was 11 years old. My half-sister, Tara Michelle Caldwell, arrived in 1999, when I was 14, and I want to say clearly, I did not resent Brendan and Tara for existing. They were children. They had no power over the dynamics of that household, and they did not choose them. What Brendan and Tara's existence did was illuminate something about Patricia's relationship to the concept of me that had until then been possible to explain away. Patricia had not wanted children, and then she had two, adored and present, and woven into the fabric of the household, in all the ways children should be woven into the fabric of a household. Patricia had not wanted a stepdaughter, and that was a different matter entirely, and she managed it differently. The small things started first, the deniable things. The things you try to describe to someone who hasn't lived them and watch their eyes drift in a way that tells you they're filing it under ordinary family noise and nothing more. Patricia forgot to tell Harold about my sixth grade science fair at Eastway Elementary. I won second place in the district for a water filtration project, built from a kit my mother bought me at Target, and my father was not there because he had not been told. She said she must have forgotten. Harold apologized. He looked embarrassed with the specific embarrassment of a man who understands a lie is being told in his vicinity and has decided not to press it. She forgot the parent-teacher conference when my English teacher, Mrs. Aldridge, wanted to tell my father that I was reading at a 10th grade level at age 11. She forgot to pass along the invitation to my middle school graduation. She was busy, Harold said. 2 young children to manage. Be understanding, Simone. I understood. I kept understanding until understanding became its own form of diminishment. There is a specific texture to being in a home where your presence is accommodated rather than wanted. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with cruelty or raised voices. It announces itself through absences. Your name not arising naturally in conversation. Your school photographs absent from the hallway wall that holds every image of Brendan's soccer seasons and Tara's ballet recitals. Your achievements living in a folder in your backpack because you learned not to bring them up at the dinner table. The refrigerator covered in your half-siblings' honor roll certificates and art projects. Your 4.0 report card sitting inside your bag like something private, like something that had learned to apologize for itself. If you have ever been that person, the one whose presence is tolerated in a house that was supposed to be yours too, the one who learned early that certain rooms had a different temperature when you entered them, drop a comment. You don't need to explain it fully. You know what I mean, and I think you know that I mean it exactly. The tolerating became something sharper when I was 16. I was a sophomore at Providence Day School, where Harold paid tuition. I will acknowledge that clearly and always. Pulling a 3.9 GPA, working as a junior counselor at the YMCA summer program, playing chess at the competitive club level, which no one at school found interesting, but which I loved with a completeness I never needed to justify to anyone. It was mine. In October of my sophomore year, Patricia sat Harold down and told him she had received a call from a friend of hers who had witnessed me shoplifting at the South Park Mall. Specifically, a tube of mascara and a lip gloss from Sephora. She said the store security had let me go with a warning. She said she felt Harold needed to know. I had not been anywhere near South Park Mall that afternoon. I had been at chess club practice in room 214 at Providence Day School, a fact provable by the faculty sign-in sheet, by the club advisor, Mr. Donahue, and by 4 students who were sitting in that room when I was sitting in that room. Harold did not call Mr. Donahue. He did not ask for the sign-in sheet. He called me into his study, a room that smelled of wood polish and old books that I had loved as a small child because it was where we played chess, where he taught me to see the whole board, and told me he was disappointed in me, that this was not how he had raised me. That I was grounded for a month, and my weekend visits suspended until he and Patricia were satisfied I had shown accountability. I stood in that study, and I told him it had not happened. He said Patricia's friend was a reliable source. I asked who the friend was. He said that wasn't the point. I did not go to Harold's house for 7 weeks. When I finally returned, nothing was said. Patricia made pot roast. Harold asked how school was going. The incident was folded into the silence of the household, like it had never occurred, and I understood then, at 16, in a way that landed with the finality of something permanent, that the silence was not neutral. The silence was the system. I want to pause here and ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly before you answer. Have you ever stayed quiet to protect a relationship with someone who did not protect you back? Have you swallowed something that deserved to be said because the cost of saying it felt higher than the cost of staying silent, even when the staying silent was also costing you, just more slowly? Leave a comment. I ask because I spent 20 years doing exactly that in relation to Harold Caldwell, and I want to know how many of us are in the habit of that particular sacrifice. When I was 17, I received an early decision acceptance from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Carmichael, called it extraordinary. I had applied for a merit scholarship that the financial aid office suggested could cover 40% of tuition. My mother cried at the kitchen table in a way she does not cry easily and said we were going out for dinner wherever I wanted, her treat. I told Harold over Sunday dinner in March. He said he was proud. Patricia said that was wonderful and passed the green beans and refilled her glass of water. That fall, when it was time to discuss the financial plan for college, Harold told me that money was tight. The mortgage on the Fairview Road house, the children's activities, the cost of maintaining everything. He said he was sorry he could not do more. He said he could contribute about $3,500 a year toward tuition and living expenses. And he hoped I understood that he wished it could be different. I said I understood. I took out $34,000 in student loans. I got a job at Sunrise Grounds Coffee Shop on Franklin Street in Chapel Hill, $7.50 an hour for 20 hours a week. And I studied structural engineering, and I told myself that the anger was a luxury I could not afford. That ambition and anger cannot exist in the same amount of space. And so I chose the ambition and I put the anger somewhere I could not reach it. Years later, from Tara in one of the honest conversations that happen between people, when the usual pretenses have become too expensive to maintain, I learned that Brendan had a 529 college savings account Harold had been funding since he was born. That account held $74,000 by the time Brendan enrolled at NC State in 2014. Tara's held $61,000 when she started at Elon University in 2017. My contribution was $3,500 a year, and a father who wished he could do more. I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in May of 2004, with a degree in civil engineering and a 3.87 GPA, wearing a blue polyester gown in the Chapel Hill heat. I walked across that stage with $34,000 in debt and a job offer from a consulting firm in Charlotte, and my mother in the stands in a new blouse she had bought specifically for the occasion. Harold was there too, with Patricia and 8-year-old Tara, a few rows behind my mother. He hugged me after the ceremony in the shade of the old oak trees outside Kenan Stadium, and he said, "I always knew you'd do it, Simone." I stood in that sunshine and I did not know what to do with that sentence. I still don't, not entirely. I still don't know whether it was the truest thing he ever said to me or the cruelest. 3 years in Charlotte after graduation. I worked at Bradford and Soares Engineering on East Independence Boulevard. I paid down my loans and $12,000 in those 3 years, grinding at them from every direction. I had a relationship with a man named Derek Whitfield that lasted 2 years and ended honestly and without wreckage, the way decent wrong for each. Other relationships sometimes end when both people are still capable of recognizing what they're looking at. I saw Harold occasionally, dinners, a couple of Christmases, where Patricia made the surface of things beautiful and the temperature underneath them consistent. I was good at performing normalcy in Harold's house by then. I drove home to my apartment on Caswell Road and felt the tension leave my body somewhere around the exit ramp, and I did not examine that too closely because I needed the Christmases to remain a thing I was capable of doing. When I was 27, Meridian Infrastructure Group in Denver offered me a project coordinator position at $68,000 a year, which was $19,000 than I was making in Charlotte. I called my mother and she said, "Go." I called Harold and he said he would miss having me in the same city. I packed my Honda Civic with everything that mattered and drove west on I-40 into the mountains and across the plateau and through the flat, wide stretch of Kansas and into Colorado. And when I came through the Eisenhower Tunnel for the first time and saw the Front Range open up below me, the scale of it, the sky sitting on top of everything like a lid had been lifted. Something in my chest let go that I had been holding so long I had stopped knowing it was held. Denver was where I became myself, fully and without needing anyone's permission. Kezia Okonkwo was a project manager at Meridian, 2 years ahead of me, and she made a joke at our first all-hands meeting that I laughed at genuinely, and she immediately made a better one, and we have been inseparable for 14 years. She is the first person I call when anything happens, in any direction, and she is still the sharpest professional I have worked alongside in my entire career. She is also the person who showed up at my apartment with Thai food and a six-pack of Topo Chico the week of Harold's funeral, sat on my couch, and did not try to say anything that could be fixed. I got my professional engineer license at 31. Made senior project manager at 34, managing infrastructure contracts ranging from $2.2 million to $14.7 million. I bought a two-bedroom condo in the Washington Park neighborhood at 35, south-facing windows, hardwood floors, a kitchen built for someone who actually cooked, which I do. I paid $387,000 for it, and it appraised at $479,000 18 months later. And I want those numbers in this story, because numbers have always been how I tracked what was real when everything else was interpretation. I met Owen Park at 34 at a fundraiser for Denver Parks and Recreation that Kezia made me attend. He was a software architect at a healthcare tech company, 40 years old, Korean American, the kind of man who asked questions and actually listened to the answers, instead of already constructing his next sentence. We had dinner that Friday. We were inseparable within 3 months. I married him at 39 at the Denver Botanic Gardens on a Saturday in early June, with 22 people and Kezia holding my flowers and my mother in the front row in a pale blue dress and my stepfather Carl weeping beside her and the whole impossible Colorado sky above everything. Harold did not come. Patricia had a prior engagement that weekend, and Harold had determined that his schedule aligned with hers. He sent white roses, a nice arrangement, well chosen. He called the day after and told me he was sorry he had missed it, and that Owen sounded like a fine man. I thanked him for the flowers. I did not tell him what his absence had cost me, because I had been not telling Harold things for so long that it had become structural, like a wall I had painted over so many times I had stopped, remembering it was a wall. Harold's heart started giving him serious trouble at 68. A murmur first, then a blockage, then in November of 2022, a significant cardiac event that required a stent procedure at Atrium Health Carolinas Medical Center on Blythe Boulevard in Charlotte. He was in the hospital for 8 days. I found out on day 7. Patricia called on a Wednesday evening, her voice composed and informational in the way voices are composed when the person has made a decision about what you need to know. She told me Harold had undergone a procedure and was recovering well and would be home in a day or 2. She said she had not wanted to worry me. She said Harold himself had indicated there was no need to bother me until things were stable. I booked a flight to Charlotte that night. He was still in the hospital when I arrived. Room 412, 4th floor, a window looking out over a gray November parking structure. He was thinner than I remembered, lying against the tilted hospital bed in a gown and a thin blanket, the gray in his hair now complete rather than partial, and when I came through the door his face did something complicated that I can only describe as surprised and grateful and embarrassed all at once, in equal measure. "You didn't need to come all this way," he said. "I wanted to," I said. Patricia was in the chair by the window. She stood when I entered and said, "Simone." What a surprise. The word sat in the room for a moment, and everyone present pretended not to notice what it was carrying. I stayed 3 days. I sat beside Harold's bed and we talked about the Denver Broncos, whom he had started following after I moved to Colorado in some gesture toward proximity that I had always found quietly, unexpectedly moving. We talked about a book on the American West he had been reading. We did not talk about the wedding he had missed, or the $34,000 in student loans, or the shoplifting that had never happened. We did not talk about any of the furniture we had been navigating around in the dark for the better part of 30 years. On the last morning of my visit, while Patricia had gone to the cafeteria for coffee, Harold reached out and held my hand for a moment. He didn't say anything, neither did I. It was the closest we got to the conversation that should have happened a decade earlier, and it was not enough. And I think we both understood that it was not enough, and we let it be what it was. Because we had both spent so long letting things be what they were instead of what they should have been. I flew home. I called once a week after that. Sometimes he answered. Sometimes Patricia answered and said he was resting. He replied to my birthday texts and Father's Day messages with short, warm notes that gave me just enough to hold and nothing real to stand on. In December of 2023, his condition worsened, more blockages. His cardiologist at Atrium Health, Dr. Jennifer Sue, told Patricia the prognosis was managed decline and the timeline was uncertain. Harold came home from a second procedure in January of 2024. Patricia texted me 2 days later, Harold home from hospital, recovering well. On a Sunday morning in early March of 2024, Harold James Caldwell died in his bed at the age of 74. Patricia called me at 9 o'clock. Her voice was steady in the way voices are steady when the person behind them has already decided what form this conversation is going to take. She told me Harold had passed peacefully in his sleep. She said Brendan was already there, and Tara was on her way from Raleigh. She said the funeral service was planned for Thursday at Christ Episcopal on Providence Road, where Harold and Patricia had married nearly 30 years before. And then she said, Simone, I need to speak plainly to you. Harold's final months were very hard on this family, very hard on me and on Brendan and Tara. The physical toll, the emotional toll, it was considerable. And you were not here for that. You were in Denver, a measured pause. I think, for the sake of the family's ability to come together and grieve properly, it would be better if you did not attend Thursday's service. I hope you can understand my position. I was standing in my kitchen. Outside the window, Washington Park in late winter, the grass brown, the trees bare, the whole park holding itself in the suspended way things hold themselves in Colorado in the weeks before spring, finally commits. Did Harold say that? I asked. Did my father say he didn't want me at his funeral? Patricia said, Harold made his wishes about his final days very clear to me. I am honoring those wishes. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She said exactly what she needed to say to make it sound like my father had made one final deliberate choice to exclude me, while leaving herself technical deniability on every word. Okay, Patricia, I said. I hung up the phone. I have replayed that moment more times than I can count. I have thought about what I should have done. Booked a flight that afternoon, walked into that church on Thursday in my black dress, sat in a pew, and quietly, calmly, without speaking a word to dared anyone to physically remove me from the burial of my own father. I think about what it would have felt like to have that courage. To say, I am Harold Caldwell's daughter. I was his daughter before Patricia Howell ever knew his name, and nothing in this world has the authority to keep me from this room. I didn't. I opened the flight app, looked at Charlotte options, and closed it 20 minutes later. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Owen found me there and sat down next to me on the tile, without asking any questions, and put his arm around my shoulders and stayed there until I could stand up again. I watched Harold's funeral on a laptop from my home office in Denver, through a live stream that one of Harold's old colleagues had set up and sent me a link to without being asked. I watched them carry the casket into Christ Episcopal, that church where I had stood in a pale yellow dress at 9 years old and thought everything was going to be fine. I watched them lower my father into the ground at Evergreen Cemetery, and I was not there. I was 2,000 miles away, behind a laptop screen, because a woman who had never once tried to love me had decided that was where I belonged. If someone has ever stolen your right to grieve, your right to be present at something that was yours by every measure that actually matters, I want to hear from you. Write it in the comments. Because that specific wound has a name, even if not enough people say it out loud. The right to mourn your own parent should not require anyone's permission, and the taking of that right is not a kindness, no matter how it is dressed. 11 days later, Marcus Webb called. We arranged the video call for that Thursday. Owen sat beside me at the dining room table and held my hand under the table where Marcus Webb's camera couldn't see it. Marcus appeared on my screen from a conference room at Webb and Harrington on East Boulevard in Charlotte's Dilworth neighborhood. A tidy, careful man in his mid-50s with wireframe glasses, the specific, unhurried stillness of a professional who has delivered consequential information long enough to understand the pace it requires. He explained that Harold had engaged the firm in February of 2021 to conduct what Marcus described as a significant and intentional revision of his estate documents. He explained that he had been provided a contact number for me that turned out to be incorrect, and that he had spent the 11 days since Harold's death working through probate court records to locate an accurate one. He said, and here his voice remained professional, but carried something underneath it, something that had decided to be completely clear, that Harold had been explicit. Under no circumstances was Marcus to discuss the will's contents with Patricia, Brendan, or Tara Caldwell Brace before speaking with me directly. Your father was very specific about the sequence, Marcus said. He reiterated it in the codicil. I told myself to breathe. What did he leave me? Marcus shared his screen. Harold Caldwell's last will and testament signed in February 2021, with a codicil added in October of 2023, 4 months before he died, 2 witnesses. Attached to both, a signed letter from Dr. Alan Devereaux, a psychiatrist with offices on Randolph Road in Charlotte, attesting to Harold's full cognitive competency at the time of each signing. My father left me his Fidelity investment account, $347,000, accumulated over 22 years of steady, quiet, deliberate contribution. He left me a commercial property on South Tryon Street in Charlotte, a small mixed-use building he had purchased in 1989 before he ever met Patricia and had held in a separate trust since 1997. Marcus had it independently appraised at $518,000. He left Patricia the Fairview Roadhouse, her vehicle, and his pension survivor benefits. He left Brendan $85,000. He left Tara $85,000. He left me $865,000 in combined assets. And he left me a sealed envelope. Marcus sent the scanned contents to my email while we were on the call. I opened the PDF file with Owen, watching my face, my father's handwriting. I recognized it from birthday cards and from the notes he sometimes folded inside Christmas gifts. Careful, slightly right-slanting. The penmanship of someone taught by a schoolteacher mother who believed legibility was a form for respect. It said, Simone, I have not been the father you deserved. I have known this for a very long time, and I have not done enough with that knowledge. I want to try, in this letter, to be honest in ways I was not brave enough to be when I was alive. I know what Patricia told me happened at the South Park Mall when you were 16. There was no friend of hers. There was no incident. I knew within a week that she had lied, and I did not correct it. I let you carry that because I was afraid of what would happen in my own house if I pressed it, and I am more ashamed of that than I can write. I know about the 529 accounts. I know what existed for Brendan and Tara and what I allowed to happen, or not happen, for you. I have thought about your $34,000 in student loans more times than I can count. I thought about it when I wrote every single tuition check for your brother. I know about the calls that were not passed along and the events you were not told about in time. I know that when I was in the hospital in November of 2022, you found out on day 7 and came anyway. I want to tell you that is the moment I decided to call Marcus, that you came anyway. I also know about the phone call Patricia will make to you when I am gone. I know what she will say about my final wishes. I want you to know I expressed no such wishes. I want you at my funeral, Simone. But I also want to tell you, do not fight in a church on my behalf. I am not worth that particular confrontation. Take what Marcus gives you and build something beautiful with it. You have been building something beautiful since you were 11 years old, and no one in this house was paying enough attention. I kept quiet for too long in my own life. I was a coward about the things that mattered most, and the cost of that cowardice was paid primarily by you. I am not asking you to absolve me. I am asking you to know that I saw you, all of it. The chess club and the second place ribbon at the science fair and the coffee shop on Franklin Street and the PE license and the condo in Denver and the wedding I did not attend, which I regret more than I have words for. I love you, Simone. I have loved you your whole life. I was not able to demonstrate it in the ways that would have made a difference. And that is the failure I will carry to wherever I am going. Dad, I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I looked up at Marcus Webb on my screen and said, "Can I have a few minutes?" He said of course and muted himself, and I closed the laptop and walked to the bathroom and turned on the shower. I don't know why the shower specifically, except that it is the loudest thing in my home and it is private. And I sat down on the tile floor with the hot water running, and I cried in a way I had not permitted myself to cry in years, not quietly, not composed. The way you cry when something you have needed your whole life arrives too late to be what you needed, but still arrives, and the knowing of it is both the gift and the grief at once. Owen found me 20 minutes later. He turned the water off and sat down on the floor next to me and didn't say anything. We sat there until the bathroom cooled down and I could feel the floor under me again. I want to ask you something, and I want you to take your time with it. Have you ever found out too late that someone saw you far more clearly than they ever let on? That they loved you quietly, deliberately, in the only way their particular courage would allow? While you spent years trying to determine whether you even mattered to them. Leave a comment. Tell me. Because I think about the gap between what Harold felt and what Harold showed more than I probably should, and I want to know if that particular species of grief has a name that other people use. Patricia filed a legal challenge to the will within 3 weeks of probate notification. Her attorney argued undue influence. The claim was that Harold's declining health had made him susceptible to outside pressure in his final years. Marcus Webb described this argument to me, in the dry and precise way Marcus described everything, as not well supported by the available documentation. Harold had signed the original will in February of 2021 at the age of 71, in full health at that point, with 2 witnesses and a contemporaneous letter from Dr. Alan Devereaux confirming complete cognitive competency. The codicil was signed in October of 2023 under identical conditions, with Dr. Devereaux again on record. The entire process had been structured by a man who knew clearly that the challenge was coming. Harold Caldwell had thought 3 moves ahead. He had seen the whole board. Mecklenburg County Probate Court dismissed Patricia's challenge 5 months after it was filed. I was in Denver the entire time, managing a $9.4 million drainage infrastructure contract for the city of Denver, watching the proceedings unfold through Marcus's weekly emails. I did not need to attend. Harold had made sure I did not need to fight. Brendan called me 3 times in the first week after probate notification. I did not answer. He texted on the 3rd day, "You need to do the right thing here, Simone. That money belongs to this family." Dad wasn't in a normal state of mind in those last years. I read it once. I noted the irony of Brendan Caldwell, who had received a $74,000 college education I was never offered, invoking the concept of what belonged to this family. I did not respond. Tara called once. I answered that one. She was crying genuinely. not performing, not strategizing, genuinely processing something she had not fully examined before. She said, "Simone, I don't fully understand what happened in that house. I was a child in it and I didn't understand what I was watching. And I'm sorry. I think I've been sorry for a long time and didn't let myself say it." I said, "I believe you, Tara." She asked if I thought we could have a real relationship, eventually. I told her I was open to finding out, but slowly and with honesty between us as the foundation rather than the family mythology. She said that sounded right to her. We have spoken 4 times in the months since. It is careful and strange and real in the way careful, strange things can be real when both people decide to show up without pretending. I am not building expectations, I am remaining open. That is the full extent of what I can offer Tara right now. And some days it feels like enough, and some days it doesn't. And I am learning to live with both. I sold the South Tryon Street property 8 months after probate closed through a commercial real estate broker Marcus recommended it named Philip Garrett. Final sale, $531,000. After capital gains and fees, I netted $398,000. I combined that with a Fidelity account and sat down with a fiduciary financial advisor named Danielle Cruz at Vantage Wealth Partners on Spear Boulevard in Denver. And we built a plan that I will not bore you with the details of, except to say that it is thorough and deliberate and growing in exactly the way Harold's account grew for 22 years, quietly, patiently, with purpose. $25,000 went to the Colorado Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I made that decision on the day Marcus sent me Harold's letter by certified mail, in a padded envelope with a handwritten note that said simply, "This belonged to you." I thought about what it means to be a woman trapped inside the walls of a household that uses civility as its primary weapon. I wanted something living and useful to come from what Harold left me. Something that would go to women who had no one in their corner when they needed it most. I have not spoken to Patricia Caldwell since the morning she told me my father did not want me at his funeral. I have not responded to Brendan. I do not feel the absence of them the way I expected to feel it. I think I anticipated grief, even for the loss of people who had caused me harm, the way you sometimes mourn a version of a thing you wanted and never had. What I feel instead is closer to the sensation I first felt coming through the Eisenhower Tunnel into the Denver Basin 23 years ago, when the mountains opened up and something held for a very long time quietly finally released. Not joy exactly, not relief exactly, something quieter and more permanent than either, something that feels most mornings like simply being free. It is a Thursday morning in April. I am sitting at the kitchen table in my condo in Washington Park, south-facing windows, doing what they do every clear Denver morning, which is filling the room with a quality of light that I have found nowhere else in all my travels. Franklin, our 3-year-old Labrador mix, adopted from the Denver Animal Shelter on a rainy Saturday last October, 72 pounds of devoted, undemanding presence, is asleep under the table, with his muzzle on my foot. Owen is in the kitchen making coffee and humming something I can't identify from here. Harold's letter is framed on the wall of my home office, in a plain dark frame, next to my professional engineer license, and a photograph of me and Kezia at Red Rocks Amphitheater on a summer evening 5 years ago, both of us lit gold by the stage lights, both of us laughing at something neither of us can remember now. I read the letter sometimes. I read it when the grief moves through me in the unpredictable way. Grief moves through you when the loss is complicated, and the love was real and the failure was genuine, and you are left holding all three at once. I read it when I need to remember that being unseen by the wrong people is not the same as being invisible, that there is a difference between not being shown and not being known. I did not get the father I needed. I want to be honest about that. In the complete and unvarnished way, I have had to learn to be honest about the things that are true. I needed the man who showed up at the science fair and the graduation and the wedding. I needed the man who would have looked Patricia in the eye and said, "That is my daughter, and whatever is happening in this house, she is not available to be your scapegoat." I needed the version of Harold Caldwell who chose his child over the convenience of his household, and I did not get that man. I got a letter. I got the truth. I got $865,000 and 22 years of quiet, deliberate provision from the man who could not say with his voice what he said with his fidelity account and his estate attorney and his sealed envelope. I got a father who loved me from behind the wall of his own cowardice and left me everything he could when he no longer had to be afraid of the consequences. That is not everything. I want to be clear that it is not everything, and that I have had to make the decision more than once. Some mornings more than others. Not to let the incompleteness of it consume what is actually good in my life. But it is something. It is something real and weighty that I can hold in both hands, and I have decided to hold it. Marcus Webb told me, during one of our later calls, that in his experience, the people who plan most carefully in writing are often the ones who found speech most difficult. I have thought about that sentence more times than I can count. I have thought about what it costs a person to be meticulous on paper and paralyzed in person, and what that cost radiates outward to everyone who needed them to speak. Harold Caldwell thought 3 moves ahead in the end. He saw the whole board. He learned from the man who taught me to do the same thing, and I suppose that, in a way, is also his. I became someone who built something beautiful, exactly like he said I would. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a confrontation in a church or a dramatic scene at a probate hearing, or any of the things that make for a satisfying story, but not necessarily a satisfying life. I needed the truth, and the truth came 11 days after a funeral I was not allowed to attend, in the voice of a lawyer I had never spoken to. In a letter my father wrote while he still had the clarity and the time to write it. It arrived late, but it arrived. If you see yourself anywhere in this story, in the being excluded, in the silence you held longer than it deserved to be held, in the phone call you almost let go to voicemail, in the letter that came too late to be what you needed but still came, I want to know what you would have done. Leave a comment. Tell me your version of the moment things shifted. And if you want more stories like mine, they are all waiting for you in the description.